thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Heather Frederick and I'm with the Center for Arkansas Farms and Food. And we have partnered with Ryan Neal and Colin Massey with the Benton and Washington County Cooperative Extension Offices to offer a series of webinars this fall. And today our topic is farm management tools. And before I turn it over to Ryan, I wanted to let you know about a couple of upcoming other webinars that we're doing with Ellen Polishek. We have 3 of them coming up in December. And if you're interested in joining in on those, you can go to our CAF Facebook page, just search for CAFF U of A on Facebook and look for registration details for there. If you have any questions for Adam and Melissa or Jonathan throughout the meeting, you can use the chat box, raise your hand, or just feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question directly. Ryan, I will pass it over to you and let you introduce our speakers today.
Sure, thank you so much. And yes, we are very pleased and honored both to have Jonathan McArthur and the Milsaps joining with us today, talking about some of their work using some software programs, both that you can purchase and that they have kind of worked on themselves. And so this is kind of a second part series that Adam and Melissa did for us in the winter and early spring, talking about some of the planning that they do going into the season and how they, plan out when crops are going to come off and how. And so this is kind of following up on that as they use some new software packages and a few different ways to kind of capture that information. And Jonathan's also going to speak with us about his experience using Tind, which, if you're not familiar with, is an online platform that you can purchase for a subscription. So I guess we'll have Jonathan speak first, and then the Milsaps can speak about their experience, and we'll try to wrap it up here by 1 or so.
Okay, I'll go ahead and take over.
Let's see, I might have to stop share.
Oh yeah, there we go. Where are you? There it is. Should have covered this earlier. There we go. Can everybody, sorry, let me get arranged here. Can everybody see the Tind screen saying my crops and Tind up here? We good?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. If you're not familiar with Tind, this is a new farm management software. It was primarily started for crop planning. And over the last 5 or 6 years, they've really developed it and honed in on, the small and mid-scale sized farms. At first, it was a lot more, paddock and, moving animals around related, it seemed like, but now they have quite the repertoire of, varieties and data that they've collected from people inputting stuff. And so we have the ability to kind of go through that. So this is very much mine so far. We are starting a new farm at the University of Arkansas for the farmer training program. And so this is going to be, we just started growing this fall. And next year is going to be our first season to fully grow. And so we are still establishing new ground. But I think the first place to jump in here, and where a lot of people want to jump in, is locations. So, we're in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And so Tind kind of gives you this way to zoom into your property, just like you are on Google Maps. The really nice thing about Tind is it allows you to, align your beds and things like that. So no matter what scale you're growing on, and even if you have one farm over here and another farm in a completely different location geographically, it allows you to kind of manage both of those the same. So, I really just want to kind of jump in right now. There are a few videos and things like that online for Tind, but a lot of this stuff I haven't necessarily seen covered on YouTube or by other farmers using this program yet. So this is our farm. We have about 10 acres of space. Not all of it's going to be utilized for growing, of course. We still have,
right now what we're seeing is just your Acrobat screen.
Okie dokie. Let me new share. locations. Thank you for letting me know that. Share. Is this good? Did that happen? Okay. Okay, cool. So like I mentioned, we have a couple of different scales. So, you know, one of the first things I like to do, and it really helps you plan for the rest of it, is to start a new location. So we can just add a new location, and it makes it really easy. You can specify, you know, either hand scale, so BCS, or tractor scale, and that changes your pathways. With hand scale, it really, excuse me, it allows you to select your bed width, your path width, and then how many beds you're going to have. So usually when we're planning out our field blocks, you know, you have a general idea. The nice thing about Tind is it actually puts it on there with paths, so you can actually see, you know, exactly how much space it is. So say I'm creating a new fill block of 10 beds of 100-foot length. And sometimes it makes you kind of, one thing you'll kind of find with Tind is every once in a while you need to refresh it because you didn't, for some reason, add the right information. And so I'll kind of cover that a couple of times throughout. And Tind sometimes reminds you. So once you have how many beds you want, it pops this little thing up on the screen just in case you can't see it. It's over here. And then you can get your orientation right based on where you need it to be, how you want it laid out. And then once you've selected where it goes, you can just kind of drop it on the map. So not to belabor this point too much, but this is how you kind of go about building everything. One of the interesting things with Tind is once you've started putting crops in these fill blocks, you can still delete them, but that crop is saved. So you can rebuild your fill block and then quickly re-input those crops. So that's kind of how we get this. And, you know, this is definitely not revision 1 for me. And why I really like Tind is it allows me to completely wipe this screen clear and start all over without taking an exorbitant amount of time. So from here, I like to go to the crop plan. But before we go to the crop plan, I wanted to touch really quick on the crops. They allow you to kind of go through and add your crops and varieties of things you use. And then they also have a bunch of stuff like that I'm never going to use. Some stuff in here I may, but they have quite the variety. Basically, if you can find it in a Johnny's catalog, they have a decent amount of bakery. If you can find it in a seed catalog, they probably have that variety here. If you see it at a farmer's market, they almost always do. So it's really easy to add crops to your list. So I won't go too into that. But once you kind of get your location planned out, you have your crops entered, then you can start kind of crop planning. And that's, you know, where the gist of this software's capacity lies. So when we're looking at crop planning, I really like to look the location view, because this lets you see much more, you know, throughout the whole year, where my fill blocks are, where my crops are going to be. And then based on like the time when you add plantings, you can definitely, it's very easy to lay it out. So this is, you know, our current growing space right now. We have a lot of fill blocks listed here, but most of them, you know, are either being cover cropped or are still in process of being constructed. But as of right now, this does represent everything we have in the ground. So like I said, we're just kind of starting to ease into our market and start testing out our soil to see how everything's going. So one of the things I really like about the crop plan is when you go to add a planting, it's pretty intuitive. I like to search. So, you know, I think for today's demonstration, adding carrots, adding carrots would be a good example. So with carrots, you know, we have a lot of different varieties of carrots that we like to grow. And this time of year, planting carrots, we would probably be more along the lines of planting a storage carrot. And so, you know, I have these carrots selected because they are carrots that I grow. A lot of other growers grow these types of carrots. But once you've selected your carrot, you can kind of go into, well, how many beds do I want to plant? So say I want to plant 2 beds of carrots. If I was actually doing this for real and I wanted carrots throughout the year, I would know that I need to plant carrots every 2 weeks, or if my market really requires a lot of carrots, I need to plant carrots every 1 week. And you can kind of select that in this drop down box. So it gives you a whole lot of play. Another thing that it's going to ask you to do no matter what is your bed foot. So because I have some different sized high tunnels at my location, I have multiple bed lengths. But for right now, we'll just put in 100-foot bed length, and it automatically assumes kind of how we want to plant carrots. If you want to change this for storage carrots, I'm pretty okay with this spacing and these rows. Early spring harvest carrots, you may want to plant a little closer together. If your germination rate's a little lower, or you don't have the right seeder, so you're crushing half your carrot seeds, you may want to plant them a little closer together. Obviously, some of this information is automatically generated for us, so it's not all customized, but it's easy to customize if you want to go and change it. So if you notice that you're the time of the year you're planting them, like right now, we're probably closer to 90 days to maturity, if not longer, for planting storage carrots right now. So you can go ahead and edit that. We're not going to be transplanting any carrots. Most likely, we're not going to be transplanting any carrots. And so, but if we were, say like this was beets and we were wanting to plant them early spring, we can go ahead and plant, kind of check greenhouse zone. And when we do that, it goes ahead and backdates when we would probably want to go ahead and plant those in our greenhouse. And the really nice thing about this is it actually generates a task list on the back end that we'll get to here in a minute. So obviously we're not greenhouse sowing our carrots. So from here, you can kind of select, what kind of seeding implement you're going to use, whether you're going to use the 6-row, whether you're going to use one of the various jangs. And they're constantly updating this. One of the things I'm still waiting on them to update, for example, is I have the JP5, and they currently don't have it. So the workaround for that would be just select the JP6 or select the JP3, because you're probably not going to plant 10 rows of carrots. So you just have to think for yourself a little bit there. But it also is really nice because it lets you select the gearing. Now really quick, if I can I pull up the Adobe? Did y'all just see the Adobe that I just pulled up? Okay, so myself, I usually include something like this in my seeding cart. So when I go out to seed, this has been, sourced out online just through some digging. And this kind of would give, I wouldn't stress over having that information personally, but if you want to have that information input into tin, you're more than welcome to, because this does, like your Jang gear spacings, your Jang, it just saves you from having to remember every time, because when you do look at your task list on your phone, for instance, this is something that will show up. It's like, it does tell you your gear ratio on your Jang. So it's just nice so that, you're not trying to dig through information online or something like that. If for some reason you haven't planted carrots in a little while and you don't exactly remember what your gear ratio is. So another thing Tind assumes is how many seeds you have. So I think that's a pretty good overview of how to select a crop. It's like this with every single crop, no matter what it is. And then, for me, I've gone in and inputted a little bit more into Tind so that I can actually apply templates. So it automatically allows you to add different tasks to this. So still seed bedding, something that a lot of people do before they plant carrots. I actually created a custom template called carrot prep. So when I select that, it goes ahead and adds things to my calendar 7 days before. So I'll do things like, carrots are going to be in the ground for a while. So we want to make sure the fertility is there. We want to make sure that the soil is nice and loose. And we really want to make sure that any weeds that are going to come up, go ahead and come up before we try to put those carrots in the ground. So these are kind of the things that I like to do to get my beds ready for carrots. But another thing you may want to add when we add another task is maybe you want to thin. So your carrots, this is probably not a problem with a lot of carrots, but sometimes you may want to thin. So thin, so dragging a tine fork or something along, a tine rake or something along those lines, does do a pretty good job thinning and providing a little bit less weed pressure throughout the time. So I'll kind of exit out of this and we'll go into some more of the tasks and other things that 10 actually does a really good job with. So not to get like too overcomplicated here. And unfortunately, it kind of there we go. Okay. Sorry, the camera view was blocking a little bit of my features in this top corner. So the really nice thing about Tind is it automatically generates a task list for you based on the things we were just speaking about. So for instance, this would be this. So obviously this is my 2021 view and some of these things are not assigned yet, but here's what I have planned for, February 2021, getting some chard out in the field. And so these would have been greenhouse produced and probably going into a high tunnel or low tunnel at this time, just in case. And so you can kind of see, and there's a lot in here when you actually look at, sorry, I'm having, the camera view is literally, there we go, I can just move it. Okay, so you can actually go into calendar view and see if that's a little bit better for you. And then you can even view who is assigned those tasks. So right now, all my tasks are assigned to me because I'm really the only farmer that's using this and it's not 2021. But one of the real big reasons why we chose Tind for the farm school is eventually I'm going to have up to 15 students and then a couple of hourly employees to manage. And so Tind really allows me to go back to week view. Oh, here, list is a lot better. So it allows me to go into the field planting of that chart, select that, and then say, oh, Jonathan doesn't do this, somebody else does. And so these are the people I have inputted into my system. It's really easy to add somebody. Most of them don't have the authority to change anything, but you can definitely give people the authority to have, to change things and not change things. So there's a lot to go over in Tind, and that's what I was trying to say with like some of the videos that are online. There's a lot in here to mess with. And if you're used to other farm planning softwares or doing this on an Excel spreadsheet, some of this may seem cumbersome. I definitely understand that, but I think Tind does have a potential of really nailing down some of those things, like how much time does this take? How much are we spending? How much are we spending composting? And so we do have an option to add labor, add time, and give labor a cost, so that when we go to our expenses, I think records is probably a better way of looking at this. Reports, there we go. Okay, so we can generate reports, and I should have probably said this earlier. All of Tind is exportable to CSV. So I have not done that personally, so I don't know how messy that data looks when you do that, but it is an opportunity. So for instance, I'm just working off I'm just working off expenses right now in my field. So I have put in, the plantings, how much I paid for them. I've also put, because we bought some kale and we bought some cabbage early on, but I've also included how much I've spent on fertilizers and amendments on all the different beds. So you can kind of go in there, and I've done it by the field block. So, I buy 15 bags of chicken feather meal and spread them over 33 beds. I can kind of go in there and add that to where once it's in here, I don't have to think about it anymore. And then when I input compost, this isn't it, sorry. Let me find it. So there are a few things that sometimes you have to dig through or know exactly where you put them. I thought I put it in here somewhere. Here we go. Okay, so here's my compost cost on 3 different fill blocks. And one of the nice things that's in here is I can update my the report for my compost. So the soil analysis or things like that. I have found that there is an option to input. There is an option to input soil samples, but they kind of make you manually enter every field, and it feels a little cumbersome for me personally, but that is a potential. And so, like I was saying, we haven't generated a whole lot of data in here yet. And because we weren't a farm last year, I'm not importing in a growing list or a seeding chart or anything like that. So there's a lot of data that once you generate it, you can carry it over into the next year. So when you have a crop plan, you can duplicate your crop plan from another year to another year. So once you kind of start generating that data on your farm, you get all these things in place, it does become a lot easier to, a lot easier to transition, say, for instance, all my 2021 crops that I already have to 2022. So with that, I don't want to go too much over my time because we want to leave plenty of opportunity. Were there any questions or, oh, I did want to say, this does make assumptions for a seed list. So it does give you, based on what you need to plant, how much seed you need. But one of the things I did run into is something funny messed up when I was trying to plant 12 rows of garlic, and it did generate way too little. It told me to buy way too little garlic. And so this year garlic was pretty scarce anyway, so I'm sure nobody got all they wanted. But I would say until you've had experience with it being right, definitely double check it. With some of the spreadsheet functions that tell you how many seeds to buy, you actually know, Excel's good at telling you when you've messed up, but it's always a good thing to double check assumptions before you go and spend a lot of money. So, when something tells you to only buy a few ounces, you're like, well, maybe I just didn't add enough plantings or something along those lines. So we don't always want to trust the computers trying to run our lives, if we can avoid it. So early on, I would definitely say, double check or triple check before you go ahead and place that order. So with that, I kind of like open it up to questions, and we can probably go from there.
Jonathan, will you say how much you spent on it? Is that a yearly fee?
So we decide. I think I had a discount this year that got us some costs off, but it is $399 a year or $39 a month. And so I think you save like 15% or something is what their website says when you pay it yearly. And the data is yours. So if you do want to export it to CSV, you can. Like I said, I'm not experienced with that. So.
And for the record, I don't think I did a great job at the beginning of introducing you, but you're a new farm manager there at the Center for Arkansas Food and Farm, and you've been there for not quite a year. Is that correct?
That's correct. I started in January, so just enough time to get settled into my office before we all got sent home. Luckily, I work from home when I get a chance to work on the computer, but still have plenty of open space to go and not be stuck in a little field lab. So so we are very much starting a new program, and our first cohort starts January 11th. So we are moving along.
You're tasked to both manage a larger 5-acre farm and a smaller scale, half an acre farm or something. So basically 2 different farms is what you're using this program for.
That's correct. Yeah. So we want to, we want to be able to show the smaller hand scale. So, working very much with a walk behind tractor, having a little bit more labor versus a tractor scale, doing fewer crops and probably selling them to somebody like the Food Conservancy or another aggregator like that. And then whereas the smaller scale market garden would be much more diversified and, something you'd see more at the farmer's market or something along those lines.
Sure. And I also should have mentioned about Adam and Melissa, but you're welcome to talk about yourself as well. But you have farmed in multiple states at this point at different scales as well. We're doing a fair amount of consulting work these days. And so I've seen a lot of different scale farms and work with a lot of different growers. And so not to squeeze you out too much, we'll let you take over and talk for another 30 minutes or so about your experiences.
Sure. Yeah, I've got actually a couple questions for Jonathan too, if you don't mind. So I saw in there where you can add your labor. It looked like on the planning side of things. Can you then go back and track, so budgeted labor versus actual labor?
That's a good question. I haven't had that much experience with that just since we've just only gotten an employee recently.
Okay.
I have had trouble kind of finding where that comes into place. I think you definitely have to go in and manually enter how long things are taking,
Okay.
task by task. And so
I assume that's true of financial budgeting as well. So if you have, if it said you needed this much seed and you're going to spend this much money on it, is there an option in there somewhere to then go back and track actual versus budgeted at the end?
absolutely, yeah. I do like that a lot of those things seem fixed, but once you click on them, you can switch things around. So it does let you, like, because this item sold out, so I didn't actually order that. I ordered this other variety that was a little cheaper, a little bit more expensive. Yeah, it allows you to update that in real time. And I don't think this is the solution for all of farm budgeting, right? This doesn't take place with QuickBooks. This doesn't take place for, other budget items, but it is a nice, it's really easy to generate certain things. And it also assumes um, a lot of value for produce. So that's really easy for you to manage as well. And one thing I didn't touch on very much because I don't have experience with it is sorry, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen one more time if y'all don't mind me taking another minute, is the catalog. So the catalog is actually generated for basically Tend will generate your storefront for you. And based on the things that you've inputted, the things you've input into the system, it generates like this catalog of all the different things. And so basically what they say is go ahead and get your catalog set with everything you could potentially grow. And then you can kind of edit that and parse it down for what you actually see on the storefront. And I will say that Tend does a really good job of having a ton of articles and information, but in case people are interested, the storefront does kind of look like this. And so, you see your cart, it completely lets you manage everything. And I'm sure they do take a price. You pay a little bit more per month or per year for using their storefront, but it allows you to access it either via your Square account or your Shopify. But I think Shopify is still in beta, so I'm not 100% sure if everything's working. But I will say that they're pretty quick to follow back up if you have any questions or concerns. And they put out a lot of really great content and how-tos for every question that they've probably come across. So I will say they are probably better at demonstrating some of these things than I am, but it's also what they do. So thank you for asking these questions, Adam. And did you have anything else?
Nope, I don't think so. It's great. That looks super useful. All right. So yeah, as Ryan said, we're Adam and Melissa Milsap. We have Urban Roots Farm up in Springfield, Missouri. We moved to Bentonville a couple of years ago to start the farm at Red Barn here in Bentonville, which is an agri-hood, and left that project this past June to pursue some other projects. We're also doing some consulting work. And talking with Jonathan last night about kind of what we wanted to make sure we provided you all with today. And I always preface presentations of this stuff with this, but there is no probably best solution or single solution for these things at this point. I do think Tend is really making strides. They've compared to, and we were talking about this last night, compared to where it was when we betaed it and Jonathan betaed it as well a couple of years ago. It is a tremendously more capable product now than it was at that time. And certainly they've done a really good job of adapting it for a much smaller scale than it was originally very useful for. So excited to see that. And yeah, looks like it's really coming along. That said, Melissa, who does most of our planning, utilizes this spreadsheet. Let me get it up for you guys. And she still prefers it to other software offerings that are out there. Do you guys have that up yet? Or did I share the wrong screen?
No, I think I see it.
Okay. It's doing weird stuff on my screen here. There we go. Also always want to give credit where credit's due. This spreadsheet started as an Excel spreadsheet, which was originally shared with my brother from Tom and Rebecca Graff at Fair Share Farm in Central Missouri. And so they're the ones that originally built the structure of this and created a lot of the interactions between pages and bits of information. And then my brother had it for a while, and he populated it with a lot of seed varieties and their specific information. And then he passed it on to us, and we've made a number of what we consider to be improvements to it in that time. But more or less, we use this for crop planning annually. It does have some predictive features, like you can see across the top. We have monthly potential revenue, and that's based off of the successions that we build in down here. And here in just a second, I'll let Melissa jump in and talk about how she actually uses this, but I'm just going to buzz through real quick kind of the features of it and the structure of it. You can adjust your farm specs in here, much like in 10. Jonathan went to the bed and said, this bed is a tractor scale or farm scale, and I'm sorry, hand scale. And you can adjust those parameters, and then that impacts how these successions are planned. All of our planning starts with a harvest date. And the reason this sheet, the spreadsheet was originally structured that way was because Tom and Rebecca are primarily a CSA farm. And so they wanted to be able to build all of their successions off of when they needed things to be ready for harvest. In other words, when they needed to deliver them to their CSA members. And of course, it lacks the nuance and specificity to understand whether or not you're planning an impossible succession. So you still have to be aware of that. You have to be that farmer oversight and say, well, it's not possible for me to harvest this crop at this time because working backwards, I can't plant it at that time. But yeah, that's how all of it gets built in. We're not going to go into great detail about the inner workings of the spreadsheet today. This is more an overview of how we use this tool. And then Melissa's going to talk a little bit about how she's been experimenting with using this spreadsheet on an iPad and entering information in the field directly. Because that's one of the downsides of this system is that, if it's on your computer, it's not particularly practical to write all of that information down somewhere and then have to go enter it in a spreadsheet, that dual data entry that farmers really love. And in our experience, the reality of that is that it doesn't happen. We collect a lot of data with pencil and paper and then fail to enter it in the spreadsheet for more meaningful analysis. So that's what we've been working towards, is closing that gap so that data entry happens in the field and is immediately translated to meaningful information and analysis. So I'm going to turn it over to Mel, and she's going to talk through how she actually uses the sheet through the year to plan and track things.
All right. So you guys are seeing they're seeing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Technology is not my friend, so this might take me a minute. I love the planning ability with spreadsheets and technology, and I love the information that it gives you. But I am a pencil to paper kind of girl. And so this has really taken me some time to, I guess, appreciate and learn and understand why it is important. And I think I'm getting there slowly but surely. So basically what happens is in the wintertime, like Adam said, we sit down and we go through and we plan all of our successions, and we plan them by our harvest date.
Although that said, we're not planning our successions with specific locations
Right.
at that point. We're just planning for volume of harvest needed.
Yeah.
Um,
And so a few things that we've added in the last year, and that I think are critical for moving forward with some real-time data, especially with this iPad, is this column over here where it says calculated crop. This column here, if you click that box, it's calculating that item, that planting up above under the harvest. So if something happens,
Sorry, hold on. It does what?
you click
So this
kale.
yeah, the kale is where she's talking about. They can't see you pointing.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm getting there. All right, so if we look at the red Russian kale, and you can see that we planted it in the greenhouse, it got to the field. This box is checked because I want that to be calculated in my future income for when it's going to be harvested in June. If something happens, for instance, if we go down to this cabbage, and you can see here that we planted it in the greenhouse, but we didn't get it to the field in time and it was stressed, I had to uncheck this box. Originally it was checked, and that means that I was projected to have that income. So if I uncheck it, then it takes that income out of my goals. And so it tells me that I'm not going to make that much money during July.
So while it is, it's not exactly the same as budget versus actual, because what it does is it just takes it out of the budget, right? So if something happens prior to harvest to that crop that is going to prevent it from going to market, there's a quick, easy way to pull that number out of what you're anticipating for income for that month. Is that accurate?
Yep. Yeah. And then the other thing that we added with this real-time method is that I can make these quick notes. So, maybe I didn't get this in the field, the cantaloupe, because I didn't have space at the time. And so I wrote in here that I don't have that space ready. I unclicked the box, so I'm not counting on that for finances. And we can kind of come on down. Anything highlighted in red, you can see that I had problems.
So let's back up just a little bit and talk about the planning process and how that works here. So obviously this is all built out already. But if Melissa were to add a new succession here, in order to add a succession of carrots, that line contains all of the parameters for the carrot, right? It contains how many seeds per inch we need. It contains all of that data, and that's all housed over here in the spreadsheet in all of these many columns that we don't have to talk about today. And so what she's going to do in order to duplicate that crop is, like in 10, Jonathan just clicks that drop down and says, this is the carrot that I'm using. And then it knows that information because that's all housed in a database. This is our database, and each one of these rows is the database for that crop. And so if you want to create another succession with that same crop, you have to copy all of that information into your line. So for instance, if I were going to add a succession of carrot here, I'm going to copy it. And then I'm just going to insert it above or below wherever I want. And of course, then we can rearrange and sort things by the dates that we create. Which doesn't seem to have worked just now, but I don't know what I did there. I didn't get all the data in there for some reason, but that's generally how we do it. And then you create your new harvest date, and it pulls from all of those fields that are out there to the far right, and calculates our estimated transplant date, our plant week, and whatnot. There are also check boxes out here that allow you to choose whether this crop is something that gets transplanted or direct seeded, and therefore it won't populate the transplant or the plant week as appropriate. So that's the planning process. Clearly, we already have this all built out right now, and we're not really going to go in great depth about that. But then as far as your day-to-day tasking goes.
So the way that we would do it before is I would take this spreadsheet, and basically what you're seeing in the screen minus these last two columns, I would print off and put on a clipboard, and I would organize one clipboard by the plant week, so that this column here is what in the greenhouse you're looking at. So you want to make sure that you match up these dates, and we do by the week. So I'm not saying I have to have it in by April 2nd, but the week of. And so whoever's working in the greenhouse that week, they go out there, they find this clipboard, and they look at this column and they say, okay, these are all the things that I need to get planted.
So one of the downsides of a spreadsheet versus a database is that a spreadsheet doesn't allow us to rearrange this information into different views without disrupting the information. So if I move a column of information over here because I want a nice, neat view with that information on it, say for printing, then I've moved that information anywhere where it's used in the spreadsheet. Whereas a database with an appropriate UI, which is what Tend is, you can create as many views of that as you want. So for instance, you just click a button that says greenhouse task list, and it gives you a nice, neat view that says, these are the things that need to get planted this week in the greenhouse. And you click field view, and it says, here is the list of stuff that is in the greenhouse that's ready to be transplanted this week.
Yeah.
For
Can
us,
you make this do that? Because that would be awesome.
No, that's the big downside of the spreadsheet for all of this. So the way we have overcome that to this point is simply printing lists. So we arrange our columns as we need, so the information that we have is visible, and then it becomes a paper copy of the spreadsheet. So for instance, this one is this greenhouse. Doesn't really matter, but this one lives in the greenhouse, so that the person who is tasked with seeding that day can walk into the greenhouse, can pick up this clipboard, and can look at it and say, this is the stuff that was supposed to get done last week. Was it done? They look for initials and a date on it. If it was done, then they look at this week and they say, okay, what is to be done this week? And they go to town seeding and initialing and dating.
And then we have another one that's for the field, and that one we organize. Can they see this now?
Yeah.
Okay, that one we organize by the estimated transplant date. And so so the person in the field is just looking at this column for the dates on what needs to go into the field. The thing about these, like I said, I am a pencil to paper person, but this greenhouse one, I don't know those of you that have worked in a greenhouse, but it gets wet, it gets dirty. Half of us can't write properly. So, it's very difficult.
She's talking about me.
It's very difficult at the end of the season to go out to the greenhouse in December, get this, and try and make any sense of it. The field one's not so bad because usually that's one person that's going out there in the beginning of the day and they're writing stuff in. But again, there's that loss of that loss of information, because while I tend to think I have a pretty good memory, if something happens in March and I'm sitting down in December and I just have a line through it, I don't know if that means that the bugs got it or it just didn't get planted, or I have no idea what happened. So that's why if we look at this, what the iPad has helped us do is that we can actually write down. So if you're going in the greenhouse, you go here, and I know which week that I'm planting. I know what to plant. I initial it, put the date that I planted it. Then when the person comes into the greenhouse to get the stuff for the field, they're looking here and they put in all this information. So this is what the field planters put in. This is what the greenhouse crew puts in. And so if we were to like scroll down here to the week of, say, May 15th, then when I go out to the field that week, I know that I need all of these beds ready because I'm looking right here. This is everything that I need to take to the field and plant. This is everything that's in the greenhouse and ready. And then I can just, log that here. If for some reason I've run out of space, if I get in here and these cucumber plants are super lanky and something happened, I didn't get them out, I'm going to go over here, unclick that, and I'm going to write that they're dead. So, or whatever it is. And so again, at the end of the season, when I go back in December to plan for the coming year, I have a little bit more of an idea. And then real time, when I'm looking at next month and I'm saying, okay, we've got these projects we've got to get another plastic on the high tunnel, or we want to do this or do that, then that helps us really look at these numbers up top here and say, okay, we're doing good. We're projected, we're on task, we're going to potentially have this much money in the field during this month, and it helps us budget.
Yeah, because as you guys know, your income is significantly seasonally dependent as a small farmer. Yeah. And so one of the big challenges that we've had is budgeting for those projects, those improvement and maintenance projects, and understanding, when those projects are going to happen, when we're going to have the money in the bank for those projects to happen, and knowing not to touch that money because we have this project coming. Because oftentimes the high income time of the year is also the time of year that we don't have time to do those projects. Yeah. So understanding that, here's where the money's going to come in, but we need to leave that in the bank and hold it for that project that we have time for in the fall or in the winter. Yeah. And then the other thing I'll say, I think the way we were, correct me if I'm wrong, Mel, but I think the way that we were, well, first of all, one of the challenges with this system again is because this is a shared Google sheet, and we've shifted to Google Sheets from Excel just because it's much easier to share among farmers and between management and farm managers. But if I'm on this iPad and I move something or I hide something, it's hidden in this view as well immediately. Yeah. And that's a definite downside to doing things this way, is that if someone gets in there and thinks they should make a customized view for themselves, it has the potential to change everybody else's view. And one way we've addressed that is we've just made copies of that sheet. But unfortunately, there's still not a good way to sync all of the cells into sheets in Google Sheets. So for instance, I can't just make a greenhouse version of this sheet and a field version of this sheet and then expect everything to be updated no matter which one I enter information in.
But it's a click of a button too,
Mel doesn't mind that at all. It drives me crazy. Yeah. So
I would much rather click this button, look on my iPad, know what I need to do, and get the information in than track down dirty, messy, wet paper and try and make sense of it. And it's also being able to collect this data real time and change it. and the history, collect that history, is that it saves you time in the winter, right? You're already steps ahead, and you have something that you can really read and understand what happened.
Yeah.
Um,
And the other piece that comes into that is we have a crop, we'll call it crop care calendar. And is that on here, Mel? Is it in this sheet?
It's not in that sheet.
Okay. But basically it's a representation of each location in the field. So it's not oriented geographically like 10 does, which is so neat. But every row on the farm is given a row in this spreadsheet. And they're arranged by our plots out in the field. And so, do what?
You can probably take that down so they can see you.
Oh, they can see me.
Oh, okay.
But basically what happens with that, like I mentioned earlier, that in this spreadsheet, we're not planning for the planting locations at this stage in the process. We're just planning for our successions according to how much volume we need. The first succession does get planned per location, and it gets written in on that crop care calendar, which we actually print off, and we print it off huge. It's like this big, and it hangs on the wall, and it's monthly. So as the months go by, we flip the pages over. We actually set the month next to it on the wall and open up the new one. And that serves as a planning tool and as a history. And all of the information about that bed and what happened in that bed gets written into that crop calendar throughout the year. So for instance, we've gone through our first succession, which was all written out on the crop care calendar per row. And we're getting ready to replant a bed. We're coming across, it's by week on the top. So we've got columns are per week, rows are locations. And so we've opened this bed up, we've harvested it out, we've prepped it for replanting. And we look back through this. We're going to use our planning spreadsheet, and we're going to look and see what's ready to go out in the greenhouse. And then we're going to use that crop care calendar to look at the history of that bed to understand whether or not that's an appropriate location to plant that crop. So those two things are used in conjunction. I can probably actually pull that up. It might be helpful.
And one of the things that, so with Tend and working with that system, I love the visuals that Tend gives you, because I'm a very visual person. And we used to plan where every single succession was going to go throughout the entire year. But we know things happen. Maybe I get 3 cuttings instead of 1, or vice versa. And so we used to have to just scribble it out and change it. So that's a beautiful thing about Tend, is you can go in there and literally just grab and drag it. So that's cool. But the one thing I love about this, the crop care calendar that we use on the farm, or even this spreadsheet, is we have a lot of interns and apprentices that work on the farms. And this really makes, it's forced to them to have to look at it and learn it and see the details as to why they're being told to do something. And to me, education is so important,
And this is actually an older version of it. It's slightly different than this now, but you can see how each of these larger blocks, the collection. So like H2, for instance, is a plot. It has 9 beds in it, 8 beds in it. And so each of these is the representation of a bed running across and what has happened in that bed by week of the year. And so we also do color coding on this. So if we observe pest damage or something like that in that bed, or we apply an amendment or whatever, all of those various activities have their own color code. So you can also step back and take kind of a macro view of the farm and understand what kind of stuff is happening throughout the farm according to the color coding.
Yeah. And I think with Tend, it's cool because it takes our, spreadsheet that we use on the iPad, and it takes this and it kind of blends the two and puts them into one program. But maybe I'm getting old or something, or stubborn, but this is a system that I know, and I know how it works. And so whenever I broke into Tend, I felt like I was having to put a lot of the information in there that I already know that works for me in my system.
Sure.
And so that was the downside for me.
So the obvious downsides of this system is that, if you're not savvy to spreadsheets, you're probably not going to enjoy using this very much. And that's where maybe part of that comes in, because when I look at Tend, I think, and for that matter, a couple of solutions that are out there, but I think, okay, this is very user friendly. It looks like something that with a little bit of training, anybody can sit down and really get a lot of bang for their buck out of. Whereas I look at this spreadsheet and I think about the hundreds of hours that we've spent making it do what we want it to do. And that's, like I said, Mel does most of our crop planning and all of that. But I'm the engineer behind the spreadsheet. And so that work that maybe you were perceiving as a requirement in Tend was just something that I had done as I built the sheet. So
they're magical because I don't have to do any of the building.
That said, we are very happy to share this spreadsheet with anybody who's interested in having it. And hopefully you can put your own spin on it and continue to improve what Tom and Rebecca started. And then obviously this is free. So it's not an ongoing expense of a few $100s a year. It's a free option to make it what you want it.
Yeah. So I think it does come down to your personality, how you function, how you learn, and what you have access to. If you're starting a farm and you have a budget and this is something like Tend is worth it to you to pay annually, or if you're coming off of learning on a farm that already has a system and a program that makes sense to you, then taking that with you as well. So, every situation is different. But
there's a few software offerings out there that, obviously the when you're paying for a service or paying for a piece of software, the equation there is always, does this save me enough time and make things efficient enough to justify its expense, and hopefully make you money, right? And when we started 10 years ago, there weren't very many offerings out there that we felt came out on the positive side of that equation. And even when we first trialed Tend, looking at it, I was saying, well, this basically does what I'm already getting done with this thing, and I don't think saves me much time in doing those things. Today, I would probably reconsider that. Looking at how polished Tend is getting and the added capabilities of it, I think it would definitely be worth that look and the application of that equation to say, is this going to save me enough time that it justifies that $400 a year? Unfortunately, what we keep waiting for is, that full suite, like Jonathan was saying, that handles the financial side of the farm's bookkeeping and the whole shebang, right? And for $400 a year, because certainly the risk right now is that you really need a number of pieces of software to effectively manage the business of your farm, and they add up. They add up big time. So We dropped our CSA management software this past year and went back to spreadsheet management of it.
After using it for like 6 years.
Right. Because it was not meeting the requirements of that equation. It's just too much money spent for not enough giddy up. But at the same time, I think Tend is trending the other way. Probably is going to become a very, very useful piece of software.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I'll say real quick, we are in the middle of converting all of this and experimenting with converting all of this into Airtable. And Airtable is a program out there that is web-based and basically takes all the best parts about a spreadsheet, which is a more friendly kind of UI, and the capabilities of a database and kind of mends them together. And of course, you lose some of the functionality of both of those things, as you do anytime that you try to combine two things that are at odds with one another. But I think they've done a really good job of making an offering that may be very, very useful for this.
Mm-hmm.
Solves those various view issues and whatnot, so you can customize your views for whatever your use of the data is.
So next year it might be different.
It might be.
I will also
and
say,
what is the farm that is? There's a farm out northeast who's doing a really good job of Footprint Farm is using Airtable pretty broadly for their planning.
She also has habit farming, so you should check that out.
Fantastic.
So moving in the right direction. So.
I will say, with the iPad in the field, you have to have Wi-Fi, which not everybody does have a good Wi-Fi signal.
Well, you don't have to, but you would have to have Wi-Fi or a cell signal, and an iPad that had a cell chip in it.
But at the very least, if you're not going to be able to have the iPad in front of you and be out there in the field and doing your thing, then I think at the very least doing this into the computer weekly instead of once a year, just so you're still getting that real-time information, is so much more helpful and has really been awesome.
So I know we're up against our time here. You guys have any questions?
I actually do have a quick question for Jonathan. On the Tend, real quick, is that iPad compatible as well?
Yeah, and the mobile, I haven't used it on an iPad. I actually don't have one, but on my iPhone, it's really nice. It's okay. Actually easier to tick off like your tasks on the iPhone than it is on the computer for some reason. So.
And then does that base off of your growing zone as far as the planting date that it calculates on some of those things? Or do you have to enter your?
I do believe I entered my zip code initially. Okay. But if y'all let me share the screen really quick, I can kind of show this really quick. Oh gosh, of course I've looked at other things.
I think it does really pretty easy do your zone, because I played with it for Michigan and Missouri. So
yeah, I've only farmed in Northwest Arkansas, so that is one of the things. When you go to your crop plan and actually view it in this way, you can actually really easy. You can really easy live edit things. So when Mel said earlier, like, oh, it's a really great spring and we're going to get 3 cuts off this arugula instead of just 1 or 2 like we would in the hot of the summer, we can actually extend that harvest period out. And then on the same in the same thought process, if you're planting it in the late fall, like, oh, I got this in the ground a little bit later, or we had an early cold snap, then it's going to take a little longer to grow, so you can kind of push this out a little bit. You can do that when you're entering it in, but when you it allows you to easily edit as the season goes on. So.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of my next question, is as what you have figured out as far as being adaptable in the field, like they were talking about pest pressures or writing down notes of, we lost this due to, flea beetle or what have you. And just wanted to know your thoughts on that. But you pretty much answered that.
It does have a note section when you actually go in to look at the crops. So you can write notes down here if you wanted to. And then it also allows you to, like, say, add a task like pest and disease. So like if you sprayed, select method, and then, so you can say, oh, I have like these tomatoes having a blight. So what did you actually do to it? And so it gives you it's pretty intuitive. Like I said, it's kind of hard to cover in 30 minutes with how much stuff is in there. So, yeah. And then, I really like one of the things that, bulk editing, you can just select everything and bulk edit it. So if you had to do something to every single one of those beds, you can edit it all at once. So you're not going in there and each individual bed editing. It allows you to mess with things. Like I said, I really, when you're planning a farm, you do a lot of pencil farming, and a lot of it ends up in the cylindrical bin, so in the trash can. And so it's nice to be able to scrap everything and redo it. And I've used a similar software to Adams and Mel's, a little bit less intuitive actually than theirs, spreadsheet based. And that is one thing I found on that was a little bit frustrating. Like if you are, if this fill block changes to size or shape, those things kind of become frustrating to change. And I'm not as adept to using a spreadsheet as Adam would be. So, but it's also $400 a month. And I can't say that price isn't going to increase because I have seen it increase. So I will throw that one out there. Because they keep coming up with extra. One thing that I'm really interested in is their pick and pack list that's coming up. So it allows you to generate a pick list that you can take out to the field with you, and then allows you, and these are all printable, even the to-dos and everything like that. It allows you to select a printable version, and then your pack list, so you can just print that out or look at it more easily. Like just save it as a PDF, like on your phone or something like that. And then if you don't have a bunch of people using good smartphones or something like that, or you can just share that one PDF with somebody or send it to a chef or something along those lines. So
nice. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
All right, any more questions out there?
Ryan, I think you're still muted.
Well, luckily Heather came in. I just wanted to thank both of y'all very, very much for your time. Hopefully this presentation gets some legs on our YouTube page, which we're going to post it to. And so, if folks weren't able to attend today, hopefully they'll still be able to get benefit out of it. And again, just thank you for your expertise and the time that you spent on that and your willingness to share it with others.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Have a good holiday if we don't see you before then.
Bye-bye.
Y'all have a second.